Welcome to the TriStar Podcast, where martial arts meets family, faith, and personal growth. Join Professor Brumitt and Professor Beane as they share stories from the mat, lessons from life, and tools to help you and your family live like black belts on and off the mat. It's time to train the body, sharpen the mind, and strengthen the spirit right here on the TriStar Podcast. So we've talked about discipline. We've talked about habits. We've talked about systems, confidence, discomfort, resilience, and even failure. But none of that sticks long-term unless something deeper in us change. And it has to do with our identity, because here's the truth. You don't rise to your goals. You actually fall to your identity.
Right. And really, if you think about that, like behavior versus identity, if that's the thing and really that is the thing that's kind of on the table right now, is behavior versus identity. Most people try to change the behavior. They say something like, I want to be more disciplined. I want to be more confident. I want to be more consistent. But that behavior without the identity doesn't last. If you think about a child, if a child believes that they're not focused, they won't be focused for very long. That will be a block for them, a mental block and a physical block. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Prophecy, yeah.
If an adult says, I'm not disciplined, then they will eventually fall back into whatever old patterns that they have, because they know in themselves, that's an identity that they've put on, that they believe for themselves that they are not disciplined.
Yeah, and look, what we say about ourselves often becomes our reality. And I know people say that, you speak things into reality. And quite honestly, I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about with regards to this is, if you were, let's just say in your upbringing, if you were constantly told something about yourself, especially at those ages that we've talked about before in earlier podcasts, those identity forming ages. And let's just say it was, what are you, stupid? Just casually, maybe even a parent said that to you. And then you start to take that identity on. So therefore, when you make a mistake, you say, well, of course I'm going to make that mistake because I'm stupid.
Right. And the parent or other adults, sometimes they say these things and they don't realize that, sometimes those labels are going to be something that sticks for that kid. Sometimes with adults, we're just saying things. We're not realizing that the kids are there, that they're listening, that they're going to take that. And then now that they hear that, that belief becomes the person who becomes their identity, right? It starts to filter through every decision that they make, because that thing that they heard, that they don't know the difference between fact or fiction. They hear it. Oh, well, they must be talking about me. So now I have to take this and I have to filter all of my decisions. Every decision that I have to filter through this thing. And it's whether you're a kid or an adult, you don't act outside the person who you believe you are. At least yes. You don't act outside the person who you believe you are for very long. You might be able to pretend and fake it a little bit, but eventually things will catch up and you will come back to your own identity of who you are.
Yeah, and I know, I don't know, maybe last time I didn't, but I always bring up Zig Ziglar, and I remember a story about his daughter, and I don't remember it verbatim. I wish I did, but basically it kind of goes along with, he used to introduce his daughter as something, and it was not a positive label, but it was a love-filled label. That's just what they did, right? And when he learned about this, he decided to change that label, and he then would start introducing his daughter as X, Y, or Z. And I don't remember the exact label, but he himself saw that he was helping to form an identity that he did not want his child to have. And so he decided to then change the external script so that therefore his child could change the internal script. And everybody has an internal script, whether it's, I'm shy, I'm bad at this, I'm not an athlete, I'm not a leader. Kids pick up on these things that, one, they hear from other kids, two, they hear from their parents, and then, not just that, like what I mean by their parents is their parents directly saying that to them, and or they overhear their parents talking about them, and the parents don't even know they're listening.
Hmm. And just talking to that Zig Ziglar story there, what a very interesting way that as a parent, as an adult, we can help to craft the identity for our children, right? If we give them a nickname and that nickname is Champ, think about the type of things that are thought of when you think of Champ, right? Those, like, that is such a small thing that you could do that would have a lasting impression and would be the stair step moment or the light bulb moment for that kid later on because of that nickname that you gave them. But if you have a nickname that is maybe, as you said, a little bit loving, but not quite as fulfilled in the other type of way as a forward movement, then it would have a little bit of the opposite effect of that. So names matter. And okay, so to bring this back to kind of what we talked about last time, we talked about Jesus and being a follower of Jesus and the power within that name. Now, this is a little bit different, but that name, whether it's the actual name that you're talking to your children with, or you have some sort of cute nickname that you have for your kids, if it's a cute nickname, you need to make sure that cute nickname aligns with the person who you want them to become, because that nickname is something that they're going to start to embody.
Yeah,
They're going
they're
to
going to
start
take
to
on that identity.
they're going to take on that identity. Exactly. Yes.
So as you're speaking, I'm almost tearing up, and I'm gonna go ahead and share this. I don't know if you ever heard me say this before, but our youngest son Keegan, I would put him to bed at night, on the nights that I could actually get home in time to put him in bed, and you know how that works. Um, just because we teach at night, but when I was able to put him in bed, there was three things I would always say to him. I would say to him, whose boy are you? And he would say, daddy's boy. I said, who loves you? Daddy loves you. And then I would say, are you daddy's champion? He said, yes, sir. Every time, every time. Now, I'm getting a little teary-eyed emotional thinking about this, but would I say that had something to do? Well, yeah, I'm going to say it has something to do with his success, because I wanted him to see himself as a champion. I wanted him to know that I loved him no matter what. And, fast forward, I mean, he graduates high school, does very well, does certainly 1,000% better in high school than I ever did. Went off to college, got a college degree. In fact, has three majors, not just two or one. In that, at age 11, he started volleyball because that's what he really wanted to do, and went off to college and has two NCAA national championships, meaning that his team that he was on won two of them. By the way, they won them back to back. And then he decided that he wanted to go to grad school and be a coach for Division I women's volleyball. So he did the work, got it, and I'm wearing it right now. North Dakota State University is where he did his graduate school. He's got, at the time of that we're recording this, he's got, by the time you hear it, he'll already have his degree. But as we're recording it, he has three more classes left, so 3 more weeks left, and he'll have his degree. We just moved him down to Texas, where he's at. He got a job now, like he's going to actually get paid rather than having a stipend. So we moved him down to the University of Texas at Arlington. He's one of the assistant coaches there for the Division I volleyball girls team, and my wife says I should always say women's, not girls. But all that to say, I go back to those three little phrases when I would put him to bed at night. Who loves you? Daddy loves you. Whose boy are you? Daddy's boy. Are you daddy's champion? Yes, sir. And I think that I believe that helped make a difference. And I even utilized that, like when he got into college, I wrote him a little letter. When they won their first national championship, I wrote him a letter. Of course, in that letter, I put those three phrases in there. And so the same thing with him getting into where he's at now. I'm sorry, I'm kind of cracking up here, but where he's at now, your child's identity is so important. And we're the primary people that are feeding that identity in the beginning.
It's interesting because I have heard a great number of your stories. I don't think I can recall hearing that one before, and so using that champ uh, verbiage that I use, I didn't know that there was a deeper connection to that. So that just is it's a happy coincidence.
Yeah.
Well, all right. So to pull this back, we're talking about martial arts, right? Martial arts, I think, does a great job about rebuilding somebody's identity because they can be rebuilt. It's challenging to do, but it can be rebuilt. And again,
Hmm.
I think this is where martial arts is really powerful because it doesn't just teach the skill. What it does is it gives you the evidence. The student goes through the thought, and maybe this would be a similar thought for especially early students. I'm not coordinated, right? Then they go through the classes, they learn a form. The student who thought, I can't focus, then they continue through the classes and they start to earn the stripes. A student thought, I'm not confident, stands in front of the class, in front of the test, and performs their moves. And slowly, that story will change to something like, I can do hard things. I can perform in front of people, right? Those things, that is an identity shift. And it's not something that is told, but it's something that's proven. So then that person can look back at all of the things that they've done and they can prove to themselves, listen, this is my identity because look at all the things that I've accomplished so far.
Yes. Yeah, and they have the stack of small wins that become bigger wins to go back and pull, to lean on and to be able to move forward and have that springboard to move forward and have confidence from that. And you said martial arts does this, but I think I will go even farther to say that at TriStar Martial Arts Academy, not only do we do this, but we actually allow the kids and even the parents to be able to, like, we'll pull it out and get them to recognize it
Mm.
and then go, oh yeah, I did do that. And then they have this little bit of an epiphany, and then they're able to look back at those accomplishments and go, oh yeah, I did do that. I have confidence now, or I am able to focus, or I can stand up in front of a group. And so not only does the martial arts, quote unquote, kind of do that, but specifically here at TriStar, we not only draw those things out, we draw attention to them so that the student and also the parent, especially if they're a kid, can recognize those instances and to be able to capitalize on them later on.
Well, again, to bring that back is we're naming it, and we're
Yeah,
naming it in such a way that is then it stands out, right? It didn't. It's not that it just happened and then it happened in the shadows and you move on, but it happened. We put a name to it and we designate that to them. Look at this thing you just did. I'm proud of you because you did this, and I know it was challenging for you, but you did this. Look how strong you are now, or whatever the situation was. And then just like when you get a new car and you've never seen this car out and around, you get a new car,
right.
and then suddenly everybody is driving that same new car that you have. Again, this isn't because, you are the trendsetter and everybody's trying to follow your lead, but it's because the thing that you focus on starts to expand. So if we name it like that, look at that focus that you just had there. Parents can hear that. Sometimes we directly say, "Hey, look at John. Look at his focus, his dedication that he had right there. That was awesome." We name it. Then the parents listen to that. They can start to see more of that focus because then they're cued in on it. The student, depending on how old they are, they can understand. Then they can start to key in on it because they see more of it. And again, it's the same type of principle. The thing you focus on expands. So just like when you get that new car and everybody else starts to drive in the same car that you have or the same color car that you have, it doesn't work because it's not because you're the trendsetter. It's because you're focused on that more now than you were previously. This is the same sort of idea.
Absolutely. And I remember one of the speeches I did at one of the schools. I think it was in the Manteno School District this past year. And we teach them the what we call the three rules of focus: focus my eyes, focus my mind, and focus my body. And so I have students come up and do it. Well, I had this one girl come up and she was getting ready to do it. And she said, focus. I forget what she said. She didn't do it right. And then she stopped. Her face got a little red. She kind of chuckled a little bit. I'm sure she chuckled out of embarrassment. you know, but then she did it. And then I stopped her from sitting down, and I said, hey, I said, do you realize what you just did? She's like, no. I go, did you make a mistake? She said, yeah. I said, well, was that scary? I said, first off, was it scary to be up here? She's like, yeah. I go, did you make a mistake? Yes. So was it even more scarier that you were up here in front of all of your classmates and you made a mistake? And she said, yeah. I said, there's two beautiful things. One, I think, is more important than the other, but I'm going to tell you both of them. One is that even though you made a mistake, you didn't go run back down and sit down and close up and say, I'm a failure. You pushed through it and you did it, and then you did it correctly. I said, I'm impressed with that. I said, but what I was most impressed with is that when you made the mistake, you laughed at yourself. And I go, I think not enough people, especially adults even, don't laugh at their mistakes. They take themselves too seriously. And I said, you're going places if you're able to laugh at your mistakes and then still keep moving. And because I wanted her to know what she actually did, because she didn't even realize it. And I also wanted the other kids to realize that, one, yeah, it's okay to make mistakes. Two, you just fix it. But three, man, if you can laugh at your mistakes, holy cow. I wish I would have learned that when I was a kid.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's something that I think that's something you can learn or relearn or be reintroduced to at any age, and it would always be helpful for you.
Absolutely. And when you said when you focus on something expands, I'm glad that you said that, because our identity, especially your kids, your identity is built through repetition.
Hmm.
So, you don't become something just because you say it once. You become something because you actually do it repeatedly. So become something that's prove it over and over again. The action is really the nod or the vote. Like, you show up, you make the action happen. That's the vote. And then, now you have the discipline to do it. You try again. If you make the mistake, you're resilient. You speak up. Like you just keep moving forward. And then over and over and over again, you keep doing that. That confidence is going to be built. Your identity is going to be changed. But even us as a parent, like you said, what you focus on expands. If we see that our child is putting forth effort, even if it's a little effort, you praise that effort. Meaning, look, they could have had a horrible kick. Let's just bring it back to martial arts. They do a horrible kick, but they tried. Man, I love how hard you try. Now, if you would just bring your knee up a little bit higher and flick that kick out and make it even stronger, would you like to try that again? Yeah, boom. Oh, yeah. Now the kick's even stronger, right? So we try to make sure we praise the effort first, and then praise the technique, when appropriate. But as a parent, if you see what you want your child, like if you know you want your child to have confidence, when you be watching them out on the floor, and when they show that confidence, I don't know, write it down or speak it into your phone or whatever you got to do, so that when they step off the mat, you reinforce that. You help to build that confidence or discipline or respect through repetition. And it's by identifying it, go, man, I loved how hard you tried out there. I saw that you made a mistake, but you picked it right back. Or, man, when Mr. Beane was speaking to you, you looked like you were the only one that was looking him in the eyes and staying focused the whole time. I love it. That's what we need to do.
Well, and there's let's say there's a double-edged sword here too, because we talked about labels, and we didn't use the word label. We use nickname, but label would be another same kind of idea for this. And labels sometimes can be dangerous, even the positive ones. So if you think like the smart one, the athletic one, the quiet one, the troublemaker, those sometimes labels like those can create a box, a small
Mm-hmm.
box, and when that happens, those kids have to start living inside of that small box instead of moving on the outside, or instead of labeling kids, maybe you could try to describing the behavior. So
Yes.
not necessarily you're the smart one, but another way, excuse me, but another way is you worked really hard on that. Not you're shy. However, another way you could say that is you took your time and then you spoke up. right? The identity, instead of being rigid and stuck within that box, then it can be more flexible. And then when it's more flexible, then the growth is more likely to happen because it's not as rigid or confined.
Yeah, and I think sometimes as parents or coaches, we don't realize the small boxes that we put kids in. And those small boxes, I think over time, if not corrected, maybe not the right word, if not identified and then expanded upon, those boxes actually become smaller.
Mm.
And so what I mean by that is maybe I was stupid in math, but meaning I was not good in math. But that's where I was told that I was stupid. But then that label, that box was only meant for math. But because I fail in English or reading, or I make these mistakes in other areas of my life, I start to let that box start to become this other box here and this other box here. And the problem with that is it was only meant for math. But it has expanded to other areas. And then what that does is that actually shrinks my ability, because now I think I am stupid in all these other areas rather than just in that one area that I was labeled as stupid. Does that kind of make sense?
It does. Yeah. And the other thing is, okay, so one this is a little bit outside the box, but I'll link it back in. You think about paper. You have paper that has lines on it, and you have paper with no lines on it. If you give a kid, specifically a kid, a paper with the lines on it, they're going to do their best to write within the lines or stay within the lines if it has artwork or whatever on it. However, if you gave them a blank page, the type of creativity that can happen then is much different than if they're defined or confined to those lines that are on that page. And that's a very simple analogy, I think, but I think it has impact on what we're talking about right now. Those lines on the page, we don't have to use them, but because they're there, we know the intention for them. Even the kids know the intention for them. They're going to stay within those lines. They're going to write on the lines. That limits the creativity that is there. A blank page is a little bit more daunting, yes. It's a little bit more scary, yes. But however, the benefit is the amount of creativity that can be there because there's no lines. There's nothing to be confined. The only confined points on for that page are the edges of the page, but no lines within. So that's and that's something I heard a ways ago, but that I think makes a good connection to what we're talking about right here.
Yeah, I agree. And we've kind of alluded to this already, and I think parents understand that we actually shape the identity.
Hmm.
We do it daily, whether we intentionally do it or not. But we're not the only ones. So there's a village that your kids are around. So it's you, it's the coaches, it's the teachers, it's other classmates, anybody they come into action with. And so we have to do our due diligence to the best of our ability to think about, our words, our actions, our expectations, how consistent we are with our kids, and really trying to shape their identity, to your point, to a blank page that they get to help become the architect of who they are supposed to be, and help them label themselves as opposed to following some sort of label that other people have created for them. Does that kind of make sense?
It does, and really, if you think about it, and this is something we can connect from previous episodes as well. The goal is not to build a perfect kid.
Mm-hmm.
Really, the goal is to build kids who believe that I can grow. And I said something to the effect is I don't want to build a perfect kid, or even my goal is to have a fully functional adult that will eventually my kid will eventually grow into. And that sort of mindset shift can happen on this level as well, right? You want the kid to think I can grow, I can improve, I can handle hard things, right? Those are the things, that's the identity that we want our kid to have, because then they can grow into that responsible, that normal, that fully functioning adult on the other side.
And truth be told, if we were honest as adults, identity doesn't just stop when we're kids. As adults, we're walking around with identities that were built years ago. I'm not good with money. I'm not in shape. I'm not a leader. Just whatever those conversations I'm stupid. Like whatever those conversations that you are having in your head, those are quiet beliefs sometimes that dictate or control your loud actions. And so what we're talking about here with regards to, the kids can still be applied. These same principles can be applied as an adult. And we can actually have a different life, a different perception, because we get to decide how we want to identify ourselves.
Right. And of course, with this, you want to start small. Have a area, an identity that you see that you're not in the right place on. Start with that, and then stack those to shift the identity. And one thing that I always like to think of when I think of identities is when back in the Greek days, when they were putting on plays, they would have a mask that they would wear. And that mask was called or referred to as the persona. And if we think back now, what we think of persona is much different than that mask that they physically put on. But our persona and identity are tied directly to each other. And with all of the things that we know now, all the information we've talked about even here today, we have so many different personas, so many different masks that we're wearing from childhood all the way through to adulthood. At some point, we need to pick one of those to say, listen, this is not where I want to be at. This is not serving me. I need to do something different here. So you need to do the work to find out where that persona is, where that mask is on the layers of masks and layers of personas that you're wearing, that you're filtering through your actual identity to show up for the other people that are there. Find where that one persona is that you want to make that small change on. Take that persona off. Figure out what you need to do to remove that from your normal way of being, from your identity, so that you can make that change to show up for who you want to be known as.
Exactly. So, like, an example could be if you lose your patience, it could be as simple as that. You're gonna start saying to yourself morning, noon, and night. Let's just say, and look yourself in the mirror if you can, and say, I'm a patient parent. That's it. I'm a patient parent, and identify the times that generally, you're not patient, and see what you can do to make sure that you are more patient in those situations. So, like, for instance, if it's usually at night when everything is all the activities happening in the house and everything's got to be done before the night ends, and you're running around like a chicken with your head cut off, and you generally lose your patience at that point. Then, and we've talked about this in another podcast, with developing different types of routines and habits for to make your household a much more peaceful household. You could go back and listen to some of those, but just decide, okay, what can I do to make this a little bit easier so that I don't lose my patience, that I have more patience as a parent. And then once you have mastered that, I mean, it's always going to be a work in progress, and give yourself grace like you would give anybody else. You're going to make a mistake. Apologize to your kids, ask for forgiveness when you lose it, and then say, yeah, I'm a patient parent, and then go right back to doing that. And then once you kind of have that down, then you can move to another area in your life. And I just wanted to throw that out as a quick example, because I know sometimes as parents, especially in like the area of life that you are in specifically, when the kids are in the middle of everything and they're growing up, it is chaotic, and sometimes you do lose your patience.
Yes. Well, and to bring that back, identity is the thing that really drives everything. And if we can get that right, then we can start to structure the outcomes, right? At the end of the day, goals are temporary. Motivation fades. Feelings come and go. Identity is something that's going to stay. So if you see yourself as a disciplined person, a resilient person, a respectful person, then your actions are going to start to naturally align. And really, that's the goal. That's what you want to have, because then you can kind of create that identity and in the way that you want it to be made. Then you're not forcing the behavior. You're becoming that person, and that's going to be the normal behavior because you're designing that behavior as a normal part of who you are.
Well, and it kind of it reminds me of the podcast that we did where we talked about I think it was called Doing or Becoming, where we talked about martial arts versus other activities. And this is the same thing, where we want you to encourage you for yourself and then also for your kid. We want them to become X, Y, or Z, meaning like what you had said, I am a resilient person. I am a disciplined person. I'm a respectful person, whatever those things are, so that they become your identity, your being, as opposed to something that I am just doing. And and when, to your point, when it becomes, this is part of my being and not just doing, then it is my identity.
So here's a challenge for you guys this week, the listeners. Listen to your language. What are you saying about yourself? What are you saying about your kids? And then here's the follow-up question. Is this building an identity, or is it limiting the identity? And then you have to choose one small action that supports the identity that you want to build, because identity is not declared. It is built. It is not declared. It is
Yeah, I was
built.
going to say that again. Yeah, because
Yes.
that's really, really important. You can't just declare I am a patient person. You have to build it.
Yes, that's right. So I always like to tease in the next episode. Before I tease this in, Mr. Brumitt, do you have any final parts on this one for today?
Not really. I guess what the last thing I would say is that just understand that, the environment that you are around is important. The opportunities that you like, how you speak to your kids, how you decide to speak to yourself, examine those things like Mr. Beane had said, and then kind of make some actions to move forward with that.
Yes, sir. And stay tuned, because next week we're going to take this one step further. So if identity shapes behavior, then what shapes identity? And the answer is going to be environment. I'm going to tease this off. Environment. The people you are around, the standards that you are exposed to, the places where you spend time. So next time we're going to break down why your environment is stronger than your willpower, and how you can design a life, a home that naturally builds stronger habits, better focus, and more confidence. Thanks for joining the TriStar podcast, where black belts begin at home. Connect with our community by visiting tristarkarate.com. Follow us on social media and share this episode with a family who's ready to grow stronger together. Until next time, stay focused, stay faithful, and keep training like a champion.